Good morning. Welcome to Chapter 5. Today we're covering processing crime and incident scenes. So let's get started. Here are our objectives. Okay, regarding digital evidence. Digital evidence is any information that's stored or transmitted in digital format. U.S. courts now accept digital evidence as physical evidence, which means that digital data is a tangible object. Some require that all digital evidence be printed out to be presented in court. Some of the general tasks that investigators perform when working with digital evidence include identifying digital information or artifacts that can be used as evidence, collect, preserve, and document the evidence, analyze, identify, and organize the evidence, and rebuild evidence or repeat a situation to verify that the results can be reproduced reliably if called upon. And yes, collecting computers and processing the criminal or incident scene needs to be done systematically so it can be explained clearly in a court of law to prevent anything that you collect from being challenged successfully. Consistent practices help verify your work and enhance your credibility. In addition, you should comply with your state's rules of evidence or with the federal rule of evidence. Regarding the federal rule of evidence, I went ahead and looked it up on the House.gov website and downloaded a PDF that describes the federal rules of evidence, and that document is linked to this presentation in Blackboard, so you could just download it if you want to. Okay. Evidence admitted in a criminal case can be used in a civil case and vice versa. In fact, there are many times when a civil case turns into a criminal case. It's important to keeping current on the latest rulings and directives on collecting, processing, storing, and admitting digital evidence. Data that you discover from forensic examinations falls under your state's rules of evidence or the federal rules of evidence. Digital evidence is unlike other physical evidence because it can be changed more easily. The only way to detect these changes is to compare the original data with the duplicate. Most federal courts have interpreted computer records as hearsay evidence. Hearsay is secondhand or indirect evidence unless it falls under the business record exemption. The business record exemption allows records of regularly conducted activity such as business memos, reports, records, or data compilations. Generally, computer records are considered admissible if they qualify as a business record. The following two categories of computer records are computer-generated records or computer-stored records. Computer records must also be shown to be authentic and trustworthy to be admitted into court. Computer-generated records are considered authentic if the program that created the output is functioning correctly. Collecting evidence according to the proper steps of evidence control helps ensure that computer evidence is authentic. And when attorneys challenge digital evidence, often they raise the issue of whether computer-generated records were altered or damaged after they were created. One test to prove that computer records are authentic is to demonstrate that a specific person created the records. For example, the author of a Microsoft Word document can be identified by using file metadata. Okay, here's an example of selecting a document. And the metadata. Okay. The process of establishing digital evidence trustworthiness originated with written documents and the best evidence rule. The best evidence rule states that to prove the content of a written document, recording, or photograph, the original writing, record, or phonograph is required. The federal rules of evidence allow a duplicate instead of the originals when it is produced by the same impression as the original, as long as bitstream copies of data are created and maintained properly. The copies can be admitted in court, although they aren't considered best evidence. Collecting evidence in private sector incident scenes include businesses and government agencies that are not involved in law enforcement. These agencies must comply with state public disclosure and federal Freedom of Information Act laws and make certain documents are available as public records. The Freedom of Information Act allows citizens to request copies of public documents created by federal agencies. A special category of private sector businesses include Internet Service Providers, ISPs, and other communication companies. ISPs can investigate computer abuse committed by their own employees, but not by customers, except for activities that are deemed to create an emergency situation. Investigating and controlling computer incident scenes in the corporate environment is much easier than in the criminal environment because the incident scene is often the workplace. Typically, businesses have inventory databases of computer hardware and software, which does help identify the computer forensic tools needed to analyze a policy violation and the best way to conduct an analysis. In addition, a corporate policy statement about misuse of computing assets allows corporate investigators to conduct covert surveillance with little or no cause and allows them to access company systems without a warrant. Companies should display a warning banner or publish a policy stating that they reserve the right to inspect computing assets at will. Corporate investigators should know under what circumstances they can examine an employee's computer. Every organization must have a well-defined process describing when an investigation can be initiated. If a corporate investigator finds that an employee is committing or has committed a crime, the employer can file a criminal complaint with the police. Employers are usually interested in enforcing company policy, not seeking out and prosecuting employees. Corporate investigators are therefore primarily concerned with protecting company assets. The actions to follow if you discover evidence of a crime during a company's policy investigation include: determine whether the incident meets the elements of criminal law, inform management about the incident, stop your investigation to make sure you don't violate Fourth Amendment restrictions on obtaining evidence, and work with the corporate attorney to write an affidavit confirming your findings. Now, law enforcement crime scene processing a crime scene properly, you must be familiar with criminal rules of search and seizure. You should also understand how a search warrant works and what to do when you process one. Law enforcement officers may search for and seize criminal evidence only with probable cause, which is facts or circumstances that lead a reasonable person to believe a crime has been committed or is about to be committed. With probable cause, a police officer can obtain a search warrant from a judge that authorizes a search and seizure of specific evidence related to a criminal complaint. Fourth Amendment states that only warrants, particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized, can be issued. Concepts and terms used in warrants. Innocent information is unrelated information often included with the evidence you're trying to recover. Judges often issue a limiting phrase to the warrant which allows the police to separate innocent information from evidence. The plain view doctrine states that objects falling in plain view of an officer who has the right to be in position to have that view are subject to seizure without a warrant and may be introduced as evidence. With few exceptions, warrants require that officers knock and announce their identity when executing a warrant. This is called knock and announce. Okay, preparing for a search. Preparing for a computer search and seizure is probably the most important step in computing investigations. To perform these tasks, you might need to get answers from the victim and an informant, who could be a police detective assigned to the case, a law enforcement witness, or a manager or co-worker of the person of interest to the investigation. Identifying the nature of the case. When you're assigned a computing investigation case, you start by identifying the nature of the case, including whether it involves a private or public sector. The nature of the case dictates how you proceed and what types of assets or resources you need to use in the investigation. Identifying the type of computing system. For law enforcement, this step might be difficult because the crime scene isn't controlled. If you can identify the computing system, estimate the size of the drive on the suspect's computer and how many computers you have to process at the scene. You should also determine which operating systems and hardware might be involved. It is very beneficial having configuration management databases to identify the types of computing systems. This is basically the case for corporate investigations. Determining whether you can seize a computer. The type of case and the location of the evidence determine whether you can remove computers from the scene. The law enforcement investigators need a warrant to remove computers from a crime scene and transport them to a lab. In addition, if removing the computers will irreparably harm a business, the computers should not be taken off-site. Additional complications of files stored off-site that are accessed remotely. If you aren't allowed to take the computers to your lab, then you need to determine the resources you need to acquire digital evidence and which tools can speed up data acquisition. It's important to obtain a detailed description of the location. In other words, get as much information as you can about the location and conditions of the crime scene location. If you have to deal with hazardous materials, keep a tight interaction with your hazmat team and follow hazmat guidelines, including protecting your safety and health, protect the evidence, put the target drive in a special hazmat bag. The hazmat technician can then decontaminate the bag and check for high temperatures. Determining who's in charge. The differences between corporate computing investigations and investigations handled by law enforcement agencies. Okay, corporate computing investigations require only one person to respond, where law enforcement agencies handle large-scale investigations and designate lead investigators. Using additional technical expertise. There are times when you may need the help of specialists, for example, when dealing with special operating systems, RAID servers, or databases like Oracle. Specialists need to be trained in proper investigation techniques to avoid damaging the evidence. Determining the tools that you need. You should prepare your tools using incident and crime scene information. Here they show an initial response field kit, lightweight, easy to transport, as opposed to an extensive response field kit, includes all the tools you can afford. Okay, and you can see the items in an initial response field kit include a computer forensics kit, laptop computer, digital camera, flashlight. And here's a detailed breakdown of what that might contain. Here's tools that you'll find in an extensive response field kit. Preparing the investigation team. The importance of reviewing all the details about the incident with the investigation team is very important to produce a coordinated plan of action for collecting and securing the evidence. A slow response can cause digital evidence to be lost. Securing a computer incident or crime scene. There are two major benefits of securing the crime scene: preserving the evidence integrity and keeping information about the crime confidential. You can create a security perimeter by using yellow barrier tape and enforcing legal authority to prevent others from entering the scene. Okay, professional curiosity can destroy evidence. It involves police officers and other professionals who aren't part of the crime and scene processing team. So it's best that they not be involved or go near the evidence. Seizing digital evidence at the scene. Law enforcement can seize evidence with a proper warrant. Corporate investigators rarely can seize evidence. Seizing digital data must follow standards defined by the U.S. Department of Justice for both criminal and corporate investigations. When seizing digital data, always consult with your attorney for guidelines on how to proceed. Preparing to acquire digital evidence. The evidence you acquire at the scene depends on the nature of the case and the alleged crime or violation. Some of the questions that you need to ask your supervisor or senior forensics examiner in your organization before acquiring digital evidence include these. Do you need to take the entire computer or all peripherals and media in the immediate area? Are you going to protect the computer and media while transporting them to your lab? Is the computer powered on when you arrive? Is the suspect you're investigating in the immediate area of the computer? Is it possible the suspect damaged or destroyed the computer, peripherals, or media? And will you have to separate the suspect from the computer? Processing an incident or crime scene. Here are some guidelines for processing a crime scene. The list should include guidelines for securing the data, dealing with live computers, saving files, properly closing current applications, and shutting down the computer. Okay, so be professional, courteous with onlookers, remove people who are not part of the investigation, take video and still recordings of the area around the computer, pay attention to the details, sketch the incident or crime scene, check computers as soon as possible. Don't cut electrical power to a running system unless it's an older Windows 9 or MS-DOS system. Why? Because data could be not saved on the drive. It could be in RAM, and you'd lose it. Save data from current applications as safely as possible. Record all active Windows or shell sessions. Make notes of everything you do when copying data from a live suspect computer. Close applications and shut down the computer. Bag and tag the evidence. Following these steps, assign one person to collect and log all the evidence. Tag all evidence you collect with the current date and time, serial numbers or unique features, make and model, and the name of the person who collected it. Maintain 2 separate logs of collected evidence. Maintain constant control of the collected evidence and crime scene or incident scene. Look for information related to the investigation, such as passwords, passphrases, PINs, bank accounts. Collect documentation and media related to the investigation. Hardware, software, backup media, documentation, and manuals. Processing data centers with RAID systems. Sparse acquisition is defined as a technique for extracting evidence from large systems. It extracts only data related to the evidence for your case from allocated files and minimizes how much data you need to analyze. The one drawback of this technique is that it doesn't recover data in free space or slack space. Using a technical advisor. Sometimes a technical advisor might be required when performing computer investigations. Technical advisor can help you list the tools you need to process the incident or crime scene. The advisor is the person guiding you about where to locate data and helping you extract log records or other evidence from a large RAID server. A technical advisor can also help create the search warrant by itemizing what you need for the warrant. The responsibilities assigned to external advisors might include knowing aspects of the C system, direct investigators handling sensitive material, help securing the scene, help document and planning strategy, conduct ad hoc trainings, and document activities. Documenting the evidence in the lab. You should be sure to record your activities and findings for your work. For this, maintain a journal to record the steps you take as you process evidence. Your goal is to be able to reproduce the same results when you or another investigator repeat the steps you took to collect the evidence. A journal serves as a reference that documents the methods you use to process digital evidence. Processing and handling digital evidence. You must maintain the integrity of digital evidence in the lab as you do collecting it in the field. The steps to create image files include copying all image files to a large hard drive, start your forensics tool to analyze the evidence, run an MD5 or SHA-1 hashing algorithm on the image files to get a digital hash, secure the original media in an evidence locker. Storing digital evidence. The media you use to store digital evidence usually depends on how long you need to keep it. Ideal media for storing digital evidence are CDRs or DVDs. You can also store your digital evidence on magnetic tape. Magnetic tapes have more capacity and a longer lifespan than CDRs and DVDs, but they are much more expensive as well. Evidence retention and media storage needs. To help maintain the chain of custody for your digital evidence, you should restrict access to your lab and evidence storage area. Your lab should also have a sign-in roster for all visitors. These logs should be maintained for a period based on legal requirements. Here's a sample log. If you need to retain digital evidence indefinitely, you must check with your local prosecuting attorney's office or state laws to make sure you're in compliance. Documenting your evidence. To document evidence, you can create or use an evidence custody form. An evidence custody form serves the following functions: identifies the evidence, identifies who has handled the evidence, and lists dates and times the evidence was handled. You can add more information to your form, such as a section listing MD5 or SHA-1 hash values. Include any detailed information you might need to reference. Evidence bags also include labels or evidence forms you can use to document your evidence. Obtaining a digital hash. Cyclical redundancy check is a mathematical algorithm that determines whether a file's contents have changed. The most recent version is CRC-32. CRC is not considered a forensic hashing algorithm. Message Digest 5 or MD5 it's a mathematical formula that translates a file into a hexadecimal code value or hash value. If a bit or byte in the file changes, it alters the digital hash. There are 3 rules for forensic hashes. You can't predict the hash value of a file or device. No 2 hash values can be the same. If anything changes in the file or device, the hash value must change. Secure Hash Algorithm version 1 or SHA-1 is a newer hashing algorithm developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Both MD5 and SHA-1, in both of those, collisions have occurred. Most computer forensic hashing can be satisfied with a non-keyed hash set, which is a unique hash number generated by a software tool such as the Linux MD5 sum command. A keyed hash set is created by an encryption utility secret key. You can use the MD5 function in FTK Imager to obtain the digital signature of a file or an entire drive. Reviewing a case. Oh, here they go with FTK Imager. Reviewing a case. The general task that you perform in any computer forensics case to review it. Identify the case requirements, plan your investigation, conduct the investigation, complete the case report, and critique the case. Here's a sample civil investigation of a policy violation and the steps. So most cases, the corporate environment, are considered low-level investigations or non-criminal cases. Common activities and practices: recover specific evidence like the Outlook email folder, PST file, or covert surveillance. It must be well defined in the company policy. Risk of civil or criminal liability is always a possibility. Sniffing tools for data transmissions. In criminal investigations, examples would include fraud, check fraud, homicides. You need a warrant to start seizing evidence and limit the searching area. Okay, look at this example here. The specific warrant limited the investigation to this office or room, but you've got a cable connecting computers and printers in another room. You must wait for a new warrant before searching the neighboring apartment. Okay, here's some background information for a theoretical case, Superior Bicycles. Specializes in creating new and inventive modes of human-driven transportation. It's got 2 employees, Chris Murphy and now whatever his name is, who have been missing for several days. A USB thumb drive has been recovered from Chris's office with evidence that he may have been conducting a side business using company computers. Identifying the case requirements, such as the nature of the case, suspect's activity, suspect's name, and their hardware and software specifications. Planning the investigation. List what you can assume or know. Several incidents may or may not be related. Suspect's computer can contain information about the case if somebody else has used the computer. Make an image of the suspect's computer's disk drive. Analyze the forensic copy. In conducting the functions, extract image from a bitstream image file and analyze the image. Here they're talking about using FTK. Okay, and these slides are of acquiring evidence with FTK. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. Here's the refined case default dialog box where you specify the options that you're looking for. The evidence information dialog box. It's for documentation purposes. Add evidence to case dialog box with image file listed. The case summary dialog box. The processing files dialog box. Selecting files of special interest. And the create new bookmark dialog box. And we're done with chapter 5.